Good morning. So last time we got a program extracted. I think that actually ended up in Lambda. Yeah. Program. Would that be something worth pushing into a little sub-method? Event model. You just kind of pass through config, maybe? All right, so okay, so this thing is the config, which we then, yeah, you have to do a type for that. Otherwise, this update would just be taking a whole bunch of functions. Well, no, actually, this update is taking a whole bunch of functions. Maybe my update should just take the config, since 3 of the things are used there. Now, so 2 of them are essentially events. Event mapping. So this gets into the question of subscriptions. Elm itself ended up doing subscriptions as an array. It's represented as an opaque type. We don't know what the opaque type is. Might be an interesting thing to look up as an exercise as well. Because that instead of those so like we could have a structure that is subscriptions, these 2 things that get passed down. So I could do it in terms of Lambda events. And then only expose things that can well, no, I did another type that was more or less just a enum, because these all contain data. So you need another type that was just your subscription type. Anyway, my more immediate concern is, what does this program look like? So we get new event, we have to decode value. New event equals new event. Now you see, we could do decoding there. Or we could do the decoder, it would then be a result. Well, the data would be a result. And I don't know that you could, you might need an entire function to also take the session value. Or does session become part of the data? Well, session is the JavaScript callback. Whereas the event is the stuff that got handled. So they're kind of separate. That, what does that move up? It would let me handle it as two different cases in the top level app update. Or even map it to an entirely different message. Decrypted is also a result. Got token is a result. This is sort of consistent error. Okay, well here's a simple thing. When we do fetch, we do got videos, which is from fetch videos, either we need a separate call, so that's the first thing we do. Execute request, a state request. So this is the step thing. Yeah. Which maybe we could do less with that. But these are effectively separate calls. Yeah, so got user by ID puts us into this state. Wait. Oh, append state probably does an immediate step. So this is saying, okay, do that, and then do whatever the heck we need to do for this state. I mean, that's... What I was looking at is just having a different message here, so we don't have to then check the state to see how to interpret it. Which, I guess this is an accurate representation of, okay, this request came back. But append state does step. Step does execute request. Execute request does this. And this does different things. So fetch videos by user ID. So this one is going to fetch videos and then complete the request. This one is going to fetch videos. Wait, what's the... And these both send responsive videos. But we encode different things. Oh. Well. Well, I mean, state.session we should always have anyway. Oh, got the state here. So because the state is in there, these things have their reply token immediately available. If I were to do that, set this up, and then HTTP errors got it as well, which I think that was kind of one of our things we were working to see if we could remove. Although the state is where we are tracking our retries. I would like to get a separate message for these things. Got video, got. If it's an error, it comes back on HTTP error. State is, well, it's either using the session or retry. Well, if it's this one, then probably really everything fails. It's still a specific response, though, which for other errors, maybe it is. HTTP response gets the state. So the only reason that, well, fetch videos, HTTP response does either success state, HTTP error state. Right, we could curry the success state if we didn't have to let the pass it to error. So one thing I've considered is we store our states, and then the responses say, well, this was a got videos for this ID, this is a got user for this ID, this is a got user for this name. And then we have sort of a state machine that says we got a response that is relevant to this sort of pending request. These things can hold on, could have a request specific type for that. HTTP error, we'd have to have some way to say it's a error relevant to this particular request. And jamming the entire thing in there does that. But if we were doing this sort of key information model, we'd almost have to have like some variable way of stating, of being able to identify the state to which this error refers. Because if we get an error trying to process one of these things, we would like to clear it out so that it doesn't stick around on us. Right, because we're not just saving these casually right now, so we're not worrying about that now. The states kind of exist in our set of callbacks. And when you just don't pass that on to something else, it disappears. I think I may have determined that you could pass the session as a placeholder for the state because the callbacks should be comparable. Well, then I checked two different callbacks that were similar. I don't actually have a thing up for this yet. Well, how about we just go there. So that might work. HTTP response. So the success would have its information curried in. What the heck would we pass to you, though? Well, we do have a source string that was mainly for error reporting. We could cancel out anything that was in that state, which would kind of be overkill. So we would like to do, got videos user ID as the thing to throw on there. HTTP response. HTTP error. So these are, these are different. Like the partially curried version of these would be a different type because it requires a different argument. And these things do need they need the session to make a response. We could save our states to get that, but HTTP error. Huh. All right, so we could specialize this to save the state switch. If we try to do a state machine style thing, we still have to do like get videos ID. So it'd be like fetch videos for a matching ID. Fetch videos, or we have to pull these out and check to see if it is for that. So you have to just switch on the state, pull out the stuff, do a comparison to see if it matches. All right. Now we've got the retry flag. What do we need to retry? That is execute request, which is state request. Which is the request type. The request state. And this is only pulling out one field, like some of these is going to have user ID and username. So you could maybe simplify it. Well, you could simplify the information needed to match it down to just the request. Because all of those requests should be roughly equivalent. That won't contain the retry flag. And you'd have to look up the session. Is there any way we can wrap up some of that stuff? Or do we go back and work on other problems first? Because I generally want to have less stuff going on here. So we said we could do the coder, but then we have to deal with the result type. It lets you decode it as a top-level thing. Or maybe we do something that tries to translate these all to errors off the bat. Well, decrypted is just a straight up result. Much as with HTTP, it would be sort of nice if there was a good way to pull out all the errors. But unlike HTTP, there's not a like singular path where you can kind of inspect the result and see that it was with OK. I guess got token result, encrypted result. You still have to deal with the empty list. But maybe you could do a pre-map on do an and then on the decrypted and transform it from a list to a tuple so that OK only gives you that and otherwise it's a wrong number of arguments error. Actually, we could have it pre-translate into an environment. That would at least get some stuff out of your face. Where would we put that? HTTP response. It's all the fetch stuff. So I want. So decrypted is is you. So you are a result string list secret to message. Well, this is indeed the function signature we want to do. But I think we want to end up changing our decrypted type. Or is this a result of? Because we kind of don't care about the error state at this level. This is more like a result dot and then, which only occurs on an OK. Case list of Except this is going to be... Nothing in the type signature. Well, maybe this thing should be a function. Oh, if this is returning a message... to contain the message. Probably, we want to have the function that is just list to result. That still has to be okay. Actually, you're just the error. Except now we have to deal with toString. So what is this? This is... I don't know what you are. You are decrypt to env? And you are just... result.map decrypted, and then this thing can change to an env. And you are decrypted, and you can just become OKEnv. Yeah, I mean, step there is probably fine. We currently still have to handle that unless we like can map to a different message that's just some sort of like service misconfiguration error. Oh. Oh. No, that's fine, because we captured the list up above. Result string, result string. I thought and then took the result and give you back a new result. Because map transforms that. So this is an A. And the result of A to a result B, result B. And then we should be mapping only the success. Right, that map is success case. We don't map only the success case. We just do this to decrypted. Which we're not even in a good position to test decryption right now. So that makes this a little bit more compact, and I'm wondering if we should have like a fatal error. Well, these are two different things. This one cancels requests. This one is just, I don't know what you did. Unable to fetch token. Authentication error, other HTTP error. Not found, not found. I could make this a result, but then we've still got the session variable in there. These could be potentially shunted to a single error response. So there's fatal error, like system fatal error. There is this particular request failed. Which we kind of handle here. We have to detect it somewhere. Maybe? Could I have something to the effect of expected one user? I guess that could be sort of a wraparound expect JSON. Then those things are wrapped in an HTTP response. So it's not exactly an expect. Now we need HTTP. We decode with the decoder. And if the code failures with the met body, and then we're just a tagger. So tagger is just going to be a function. So expect JSON. All right, well, no, it maps the decode error to bad body. So that's an HTTP error type. If I wanted to extend that type, I would essentially have to do yet another error type. Well, I guess that would just have like HTTP error blah, and then user not found. Got users, huh. So you've already washed out the HTTP error type. So the handler here is only going to get this. But we could have list Telix user 2. Well, we've already left the result. So if that can fail, it turns it back into a result type. So I have to be at the level of result HTTP error blah 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 blah. And we either call success or HTTP error. And the nice thing about this is that we can also use HTTP response for like got token, right? Oh, got token doesn't use centralized error handling. That is a straight up result because we have to have a different failure mode for it. So I would need the point in the response where we are response HTTP error list helix user. We would have to translate that to an application error that includes HTTP errors, and then it could all go to the error handler. So it's like, and all this stuff happens in a state, essentially. If I've got one application, maybe should it be like and we have a separate message that's stateful. Then that wrapping handles somewhere else, and then that's like a state update function that could be interesting. Like all this stuff needs the state. It needs to be able to respond to the session. We have to know what a message is. So that's almost like a mini model, where the state is the model. It kind of has its own little messages. So does state translate into, okay, so this is like my model. Oh, and I see these are the same names as my HTTP request functions, which how we can use these as state dot. So if they're called from here, this is event, which is sort of its own little thing. I guess it's pretty close to the state system. I guess it'd be like state dot like a init user. Could we turn this into kind of a state machine? We actually had like an update that got the state from, well, from every message could receive a state, and it was like, oh, because no, state was in the Lambda messages, because we were passing that back and forth. How can we bootstrap this? We'll probably do it in here. I'm trying to think if there's a better way to transition this. We're not actually currying the final event on those things yet. So we could do this as swapping the arguments. And then having a wrapper that puts the state when we construct these things. Which would take the place of that, which would then become, okay. An HTTP error. So we always construct these things. Oh, the success type. The state itself, which maybe we want to move that. So you move out to the end. You move out to the end. This is actually very uniform right now. The success type right now is state A, so it becomes a state. Okay. Maybe we can have an in message thing that's like, but these handlers still need to have it, even if their messages themselves don't. Which means there has to be an update function for it that has that extra variable. We could maybe do duplication and to move everything over a little bit, little by well, because the return type of the message changes. Still, that would kind of let us implement things and then break it. This is a type. Do we have a none type here? You're an effect. I don't know if I kept no effect. Okay, that keeps us in a compilable state. Now, if we pull out, so I always forget if update is message model or message. So it's message model. Really, we want this. So you don't produce another state necessarily. You produce what? We may do another command which includes a message. So I might need some way to do like effect mapping. Well, because updating the model is essentially wrapping it in the upper level message that is with state. Which means you would need a function that could do that. What do I call it? No op? None. So that's a different argument order, but I might need to have this as a curable function. So that's just no effect. We want something like, well, that's an effect that's wrapped up, not a message. We need to be able to do something like do this effect and then wrap the result in with state. So that would be an effect map. It would be just like kind of like command map. Now wait a minute. Um, so in a normal case, you might actually be doing that command map outside of this little substate thing, which means that maybe you would be in effect submessage. So effect message, all we have is perform. We don't really have an effect module. Now we have a function of A to B, an effect of A, an effect of B, no effect is going to do nothing. Perform. We don't need to fold, I don't think. We just need to do a recursive map. No, we need to do effect map F over each of them. Decrypt. Oh, and you're just your self response. Doesn't have a message type. Request is an HTTP request of message. So ideally, maybe you should have like a request map. Oh no, that's a type. I might actually need that. HTTP.request. Yeah, probably. So actually that's what I could expect. So we have to be able to map this. And then we have to be able to map request. Or is that just HTTP? Well, the exterior thing might be HTTP.map. Well, as long as it's one type, you could technically decode it here. So you are some sort of result to message function. So I think let's see, how does that go? Expect string, and then this thing is do tagger and apply F to it? Yeah. Okay, doesn't seem to be complaining about this. Let's see if we can shut up the other thing, just so that's easier to see. Okay, so yes, we cannot decode this just yet. Oh, okay, so you have to be able to qualify as B. Oh, so I have to reconstruct you. That's kind of annoying. Now, this might actually be a problem, type-wise, because the request is what has the type. This is list effect B. Right. And wrap it in batch again. And HTTP request is off because we don't have a request mapper yet. You know what? You fit. All right, so this types. Then request. Maybe this will Because that, yeah, the type change might make this not work. Yep. Where do we construct a request? It's a 2 Lambda request. I know this is the type we expect, so we never actually construct one of these here. I guess 2 Lambda request was still similar. Yep. And the actual mapping function. All right, and then we're going to say that map equals request map. And we're going to call it http.map. So now we can do HTTP request. Now, you see, because it's saying with the state again, but this is where we might have to do the updated state. So maybe there should be 2 functions, one that wraps it back up. The second argument to be state message. Oh no, because you are, wait. An effect message is a message with a state message. I mean, it would be circuit to actually run this. Now we're going to produce an effect, so this would be okay, that's typable. in some cases, we're going to need to do modified state. So now the question is, can we actually move these things? Unchanged model's fine. Unchanged model, unchanged model. Send response, send response. That's doing a state update. Model's doing an append state. Unchanged model. So we need to chain to the next thing. We still have to be able to update. We need to some way signal that we need to go back on the queue. Well, that may have been a shortcut. Because that's going to go on pending requests, and it's going to step. And like all of this stuff should have been fine. So it's really just we know what state we put on there. All right. Do we have a typable program? We have a typable program. So that's our updated state. It is fetch videos with name. Of course, if state responses come back and we need to go do auth, there's HTTP error 401. Which does need the model. So either we have to pass down the model or we have to have a sort of effect type of states that says, I need to do this. Well, if we just had straight up effects translation? Then that would be your mapping. Where did I end up using batch? Command fold, which is for the with all requests, which is for the pending queue. Maybe that's okay. So the state function would need to say an error happened or a success happened. We need information. We need to decrypt. So an error goes back to our state, which can ultimately do a fetch request. Error response, send response, send response. Append state, which turns back into a request, send response. So state only has two effects. It does HTTP request and it does send a response, which error response, and these are pretty trivial. So essentially we have state.effect types. At this point we are going to need to fully qualify all of those. Okay, this will have to be mediating between state effects and Lambda effects. Oh, there will be HTTP request, there will be send response, and there will be next step. Our effect on the outer model is to do an append state. No, wait a minute. No, because it's the error case that was the blocker. Now, I might actually be able to intercept that at the outer state. Inspect into with state and say, well, if it was a bad status, we just reappend. So now we're in this awkward spot where we've kind of got some stuff done, and I kind of want to go in here and see if it's fine to inline this. List show push is the message form. So the net result of this is to call an effect for this with an updated state. Was this an issue with getting a hold of auth? And this might be and then, oh, getting a hold of auth. Which we still have to switch over. Because that's a maybe. And execute request needs API auth. Wait, API auth. State request. Well, it's whatever gets past auth headers. So that gets constructed from end, yeah. So that's why I did it that way. Because to make that request directly, we have to go through all that garbage. Oh, so one way to do that would be to say we only call state updates when we have an invalid auth. We pass that down. It can make whatever requests it needs to. This is the only case that a state update causes us to do this. Huh. So maybe level 1 is actually just keep all of these messages and just sort of internally build that state machine thing that does state and then requests effects. Hmm. Speaking of state machines. So in terms of a true state machine, you would have things like our state is we should fetch videos, and then when it's sent, we say we're waiting for it. You might be able to do a recursive type. But really, I don't know that you would do that. It would sort of imply that you had like sending and waiting, which should maybe be a separate thing. Or maybe you do it, update this thing to be like, should send, sent, retried, failed. Or what's the that's the data type? So it's like not asked, and I forget what the intermediate type is. I mean, it's loading. And there's like data X. I guess it would be, well, you'd have retried, you'd have retrying, and then failed for whatever reason. You have to switch over more stuff during retries. But that would kind of make that orthogonal to what we were doing. And I guess since you've got requests there, you wouldn't necessarily have data as a thing. And really, you don't have a complete state on there, because when you're complete, you just respond. Would that remove the need to have an effect type? Because then, like, the state machine would say what it wants to happen, and then the outer would have to update that state from like not asked to loading. And in that case, you'd have to do like retry and retrying. We have to send the request and update the state during the retry. Because right now that part, the in-flight, not in-flight is just, it's been sent, it's been received. So we have not asked, will retry, retried. Right now we try to only get checked during actual failures. So in order to make a little state machine, I either have to pull in Lambda stuff to send facts, or I have to define my own effects, or I have to be able to interpret what to do from the state itself. You'd have to have like a state to effect somewhere. So all of those correspond to send something. I'd have to have a state that represented a successful result in sending it for 3 of those. In which case, they'd have to have storage for the data. So to pull it out, you need to have your own little message type. It's like you can't quite do that in either file because we need to do facts. Oh, right. The thing in and of itself that requests that we send this thing is where we run into trouble. So fetch videos with name. Videos reply, videos with name reply. ID username. We didn't actually use that data there. So to not be dependent on this, Oh, okay. We have not done dash pop. It's dash pop. So we added with state. We put in a hook there. We swap the arguments. Maybe I just keep the maps and try some other things first. Assuming that we can do that, but that I might not actually need it. So to make these, they're separate things. We separate fetch videos. We've got like got videos and got videos with name. Which this has like the curried arguments in it. Do we have a type for the user in a state? No. It's just that. So then if we got that, we wouldn't care about that. Let's see, would I do the ID name translation there? It's really about formatting the response. No, we still have to check. No, we're not checking a user here. And then this would only be used for you. So technically we've got user ID. This is starting to become a type. Now, isn't there a way to capture the entire thing and the parts? No. Oh, no. Fetch videos with name is going to have a user. We forgot a parenthesis. So we would want to check that one. And that one. Okay. So fetch videos. That makes the upper part clear. This only varies by the message we send, so we could also just say, here's your success handler. And I guess it helps this case. No, this case. Stay nice and clean. Separate messages, separate requests. All right, so that makes this logic a little more straightforward. I was working on this at one point. That would kind of be one more thing out of the way. Because maybe the state was partly an issue in that. So if I wanted to have... Oh, I'd have to wrap the error type if I wanted to report it all at once. Huh. I could actually do interpretation of the HTTP error and produce a different message. If I've got my own error type, then I could just have, unauthenticated. It's like we're currently passing the state around. Well, if we're able to move that out, then that would be part of the state machine. So it would interpret unauthenticated. You would have like other errors. And we would also We would have unauthenticated. Would have other we'd have like HTTP error, which would either have to wrap a plain HTTP error or reproduce them. Wrapping it might be fine. So you have an unauthenticated HTTP error. And then like not found error. User not found error. And we would be then we could have things in that error type, and then we have the translator to HTTP to error type or to message, or that pulls out the errors. So we have our application error, which can be, I mean, I guess step one, just to get the wrapper in place. And does that cause us no troubles? Aha. We have the message name, which is not going to be HTTP error. It's going to be like a, well, there will be an HTTP error. It's not a message? Yeah, it's just going to be like a request error. Maybe it'll still be HTTP error, HTTP response. Okay, so request error. Now we want to change. And it's just straight up wrapper for the time being. You are an error. And our plan is eventually to handle all of these somewhat separately. Oh, but that's not actually going to work because we're not actually wrapping that. But it should be that we take an HTTP error and we put an HTTP error around it. Okay, so that type checks. Now, can we move is that the wrong level? Because we want all request errors. Well, we want to pull out all request errors. But do those become top level messages now? All right, we can leave you in place for a minute. really we want to translate it to that. And we're translating this is where we're translating an HTTP error to something. http.badStatus. So instead of translating to a custom error type, we're translating to a custom message. Maybe the body would have been useful there. And then my previous, indeed. So that's all the HTTP response stuff. So we don't really have an error type. So I was thinking it'd be a result of a success or an error. But we could just have a thing. Well, it's essentially doing the same pattern matching, but it lets us get a success case closer in. I guess what it would let you do is somewhere, I mean, that was kind of centralized error handling specifically to get the authentication failed message. But we're just kind of pulling that out. So now we want to go back to HTTP error. We don't need this. Identify auth errors in response handler. Then that also yeah, so we're just turning them to messages instead of like special error codes. You would turn it into an error type that was handled by a single message if you wanted to do some sort of bulk error handling. Which, I mean, maybe you want to pull that out of your main message loop. So then we would do like user not found. So the string is only going to tell us which of the two user requests. It's going to be a fetch user request. So all we do here is this. Oh, what happened? I pulled some stuff out of here. Is what happened to this. And since everything around it was kind of indented that much, we didn't notice. All right, so the message states are happy. We've got our state.session. So whenever we're doing that, whenever we're fetching a user by ID or by name, we got user by name, we got users by ID. Our success handler is going to take just a users list, oh, that's why I was trying to do the errors up front. So I could get it down to a single response type and then say, well, if it's okay, then we apply our... Oh, no, because we do this if it's okay. Well, it's a result. We're thinking in result map terms. But this would only apply where the result is a list user. We could just result map it. So the upstream result is going to be list user. So we could just take that result, map it. Oh, but then that has to have the error type, which will get picked apart later. So this would be to do that in a generic way. Well, the function that does this just has to take its own message for success tagging, I guess. So it has to do the tagging rather than just being something that we can kind of throw in line here. The custom error type would have allowed me to put it in the HTTP in the result list user error stage of the pipeline. So it's like we get a HTTP response, we map it into userland error, or we map the HTTP error, which That could almost be a separate step there, now that I think of it. Well, that's mapping the error to a message, which is actually kind of the success type. It's removing the result. Actually, we could map into HTTP error. Well, we have to check for all messages then. But yeah, the sort of userland error would let us adopt it functions like bad body. We could map HTTP errors into R type and then also go in and say our decode failed. But it would still be, we would still have it as a result. So you'd only have to deal with the error cases. These translate it to messages, so it's not identified as a result still. Well, let's see if we can do this as taking a tagger. So the awkward thing that's going to be here is we've got the state A message thing. So this is ooh, and the state also ends up in an awkward. Well, this thing is gonna get the state itself. Because of where it has to do things, it has to apply it. And it needs to get a list of users. So this needs to have, the net result of this has to be has to match that. This might be a helix.user type. The net result of this has to be a state to message. So you get the thing you handle. There has to be a state A message. That's state data message. Validate user. So we've got success tagger. We've got the rest we could kind of curry. Maybe? Let's see. No, because we have to process that. So this does the case. Success state user. Yeah, and getting the state out of these messages would streamline this a fair bit. Does that type check by itself? Type checks by itself. So we want to get it, so we're getting this as an argument to these. And then you are singular. Oh, empty list is probably roughly equivalent here, because we're saying we're accepting longer lists. Okay. These are still stateful things, but it makes all our happy paths happy. I guess if you did have like an error type, then you could have like just an errors function, just throw it over there. Although the retry does some stuff. So to do a state update, it almost, state. Maybe you could get that written. Well, no, because we're still going to refer to lots of model update things. And we've got the, well, it's going to be a different kind of fetch, I guess. HTTP error. Does do things with state. Or rather, it needs the state to retry. But maybe that could be better handled outside. So the effects we're going to have are Huh. Now you're actually going to return a state, but this is all, in theory, state in, state out. Is it going to be HTTP request, or are we just going to say we should query based on my state? Or we got a request type. Well, append is like query, isn't it? Well, there's new query based on my state. There is, huh. Wouldn't that just be a query, though, based on this new state? Well, depends on where I put the mapping to HTTP requests, is whether this needs a type variable and all that stuff. Oh, this is still app update. I'm not sure this needs to be app update anymore. Not strictly. Now you're going to have helper functions and things. So our response is sort of, So we've got the state right here. Our response is going to be message. Or we've got error response and success response, which are defined. No, we're not really using their stuff right now. Error reason. Okay, response, which is a value. Right. So that's why they can be different types. So probably we just do this. But I don't know if I should pass the session here, as in that response. Or if we can pick that up from the state that we're managing. That would turn it into a state effect. And we have to map state effect into a with state message of that effect. So you're probably going to want your own error response state. Do we use this anymore? For the with all requests. And it might mostly just be to pull that out. Actually, that might make it simple enough to do inline. Because we're really not adding any value here. Other than being able to translate this code, but... Oh. Okay, so it saves me some parentheses. That is to be seen. Okay, so HTTP error. You send a response, You return a new state. And perform a new query. So model, don't want no model. If we're returning, we need to return the state if we're going to do anything. Now, authentication failed. We'll let the state update. Okay, so this is a little bit special. We have to do the auth reset. Now I could technically inspect into the state message at the upper level. Or maybe I just handle authentication failed there. Because you're not changing state at all, which would be the main reason to do that. You are, but it's not. It has to do a little bit with the application state as well. Maybe user not found stays here. So maybe error handling is above us. Now that means the retry behavior is out there and the state update of the retry flag is out there. The other way to do that is we have like query and like retry. But I either need to have something special, and it's really just query, something special about this response to say, and reset auth. Or I have to be inspecting authentication failed at the upper level. The only time we actually modify state is on retry and when we're effectively returning a new when we're doing a new query. So this would be query state. However, all of these responses would then have to provide the session token from the state. Which might make that a little bit more complicated. So the response there is session first, which technically it's lambda.session. Actually, states have to keep this. Yeah, they're just considering it a value. Oh, maybe a little bit more verbose than I'd like. I guess I could do where we pass state and it figures out what to pull out of it. So that makes this no longer trivial. Also, I think for right, new event was getting that itself. Never got around to swapping this. Actually, some of these will essentially get taken over. Assuming we can actually integrate this. Okay, you stand alone. I may have saved state. Yeah. So that makes this a little bit more complicated. a little bit more dependent. State. Pardon? Oh, it's a let in, not a... Ooh, what did I lose here? Aha. I suppose a user type. So where the heck did I get it from? Fix.helix.decode. decode. HTTP error. So maybe straight up HTTP errors should just be handled above. And authentication would get passed down as a particular message. Okay, so we missed an extra state variable there and there. We just stopped going through these at some point. All the reply encodes. Actually, does that take... That might completely take care of all the replies. User not found. Missed that one because it wasn't in the middle of a bunch of their stuff. Send response. Right, we updated the calls, but not the functions. Did I actually change this one? Okay, so error response state is still not exactly the same setup as all the other error response things. Well, but it needs that signature, which is probably why my others were following that pattern. Oh, nope. And we copied message again. I mean, it might be nice to pull some of their quests out there, but I won't get all of my HTTP requests. Oh, and that's why I wanted to, well, we turn these into a value. Makes this a double value, unfortunately. And then our update. So where a state is updated, we pass that. Otherwise, it's the same, which might be a little bit hairy on the other end. Oh, this isn't state. Right, because I still copied the prefix one. I guess I could let block these. And just error response blah. Or I do a tiny wrapper on update. No, I'd have to have two types then. I'd have to have the one without the session and one with the session. Because you'd have to be able to say, okay, oh, that was a response. Let me tag the session on there. I mean, I guess you could turn the update function into a closure and then have an update for every state. You have to remember that somewhere. And this is handler where we missed error response session. Error response state we have not changed because that goes into a particular thing. State. Oh, probably. And one thing that gets weird about the currying style is that like you end up choosing your orders because of how you want to use it, and then sometimes you get things that kind of conflict. All right, so now we've got this totally untested code. And unfortunately, that means, you need to be able to see into these to implement them. You have to send it messages. And I could, what would I have to do to hide these? I would have to send the HTTP requests from here, which would mean dealing with the types that did that. I mean, I could make my query into query, and here's my success handler. Well, we need a way to bootstrap then. Like update init in whatever state we're in. And then give me the query for that. And then Lambda to be clear about our effects. Which is going to be kind of annoying. Or maybe I have to leave you. I could, I suppose, just effect and then do lambda dot blah 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 blah. Because I don't think there's, let's see, lambda. Batch decrypt HTTP requests response. Did it rain? It rained. I don't think it's going to be heavy. Okay, so that was that. That was batch, HTTP request. And response. Decrypt. Letter. Which that is lambda, but not lambda. All right. And we would just have to refer to these as like state.effect, state.message to keep things straight. So now we have to do I guess I need to probably need to handle that there, but all right, now we're going to be in the compile loop a lot more. I think I booked my audio cable. Okay, I think the home is gone. Okay. So that compiled. An actual implementation. So the 2 times we send query are retry, which is an append state, and that uses by ID, which is an append state. Now this actually doesn't fall into my other things. Let's see, so this was which maps straight over to lambda.response. Oh. But with state is meant to say with this state, and then we put it into a pipeline somewhere. Whereas update goes message, and then we apply it to a model. Session dot, not session dot result. Okay. So we want expect HTTP error to there. Authentication failed is going to be a little bit tricky. These things. So this is changing the message and wrapping it in a with state. So user not found. Got videos. So I want to be able to abstract this better at some point. Oh, HTTP response. Not everything. Everything with HTTP response, though, is. Which means it's probably a better place to apply that. And I want to eventually move the with state out of HTTP response. But that changes the whole type signature chain of HTTP response, because you don't have a state anymore. Which means you don't. But this whole thing gets wrapped in with state. I might, because that's a state.message now. And it's naming a very specific message here, so we have to be able to do that. You're wrapping the with state, which means this has to be a state.message. Yeah. Argument removed. And then all of our gots. Not that one. Wait, what's the user? Okay, that's all the carryover information. Of course, now all of these get evaluated within the context of their state, so you don't necessarily need to carry that stuff around. Well, you have to switch off the request because it's still a specific thing. Okay. We made a bunch of requests and never sent a response. Let's see. So state. I don't think can do anything or reveal anything. So you should have sent a response at some point. Oh, okay. So we didn't get to the top level. Okay, so this was our fetch token. Actually, we might have had a build error here, because like soup. Do we actually need the debug here? Okay, so that was a build error. So now I think we can get rid of some of this stuff. We can get rid of all of these. Almost assuredly. And we have to look at how we map authentication failed over to a state update. So you're an HTTP error. Are you just this? It types. Are you sufficient? So auth failed. Send a new query. Send a response. Send a message. Bend state. Yeah, you should be totally sufficient. We have to name a specific state message here, but and that's error handling, which you can sort of emulate by, let's see, where is maybe something like that. I think we hadn't compiled yet. Unauthorized. And we appear to have retried once. All right, so you've got HTTP error. Probably that might make more sense now. So we got the one weird thing we've got going on now is that we're mentioning all of our state messages explicitly in here. I mean, you could do like little function wrappers. Authentication failed. So this is all wrapped up in this one HTTP response. But if we to have that stuff in the response pipeline, you'd have to have it doing the HTTP requests. Which puts you into effect types, so the parent effect types, unless it has its own, HTTP request effect type. Or we're just going to do a message translation on it. All right, is there any place? So HTTP response is nothing that wraps with state. Which also goes in the HTTP error, so that we have our session token. So HTTP error could probably be just the session token for the response. And then we would map out additional errors here if we needed to. But to get this entire thing in with state, we'd have to also map down all the other HTTP errors, which we kind of had HTTP error there. It's like, well, do we need to? HTTP errors. Oh, we need an HTTP handler error because we have no, because that's the generic handler. Got token handles its own errors, although we were wondering if we could centralize that a little bit again. Yeah, the application feels like a little bit of a split personality right now because we've got all the stuff that's specific to the series of requests we need to make is a little bit split over two things. So the states are specific to what we need to do, and then this is like a middle ground that's like we need to do stuff with the Twitch API. So we have to get our tokens and stuff. Well, authentication, getting the secrets to get the authentication. All right, we sort of took care of that. All right, extract state updates to state module. And continue thinking about this. At some point, I want to look at Elm HTTP, see if there's any other interesting features of how they did it that might be helpful to us. And think a little bit about how we do some of the subscriptions and the mapping to application messages. That's just a whole bunch of functions right now. Although I guess, let's see, because they do have some very specific signatures to them. Well, once we get to this point, it's just you need some general way to. Maybe if you translated this into like a tuple or something, then you could do a more general mapping layer so that it was just A to message. But it'd be a very particular A. I mean, I guess you could do the inline function where it would all just have references to config. Or you could have a type that's like new event function or new event handler. We got this thing, and it's going to be repeated here for decryption handler. So yeah, that scales kind of poorly as you add more stuff. Oh, and what would the type of sub be? If it had to have functions from arbitrary types. To message. Now, sub as enum. This is where we have to look into how Elm handles it, because you can do sub as enum, and then each thing has a specific type to message. Sub overall is message. The rest is well known. And then that can pull out the particular function stored in that particular thing and apply it. Finding it in a list could be kind of annoying. Maybe you find it once uphand, then you get a local reference, and then, yeah. I don't know. I need to eat lunch. If it's wet, I don't know if I'll be able to ride to the grocery store, but oh well. Thanks to the subs. Thanks to everybody who hosted me. In the normal course of events, I'll pick this up Friday morning, Friday afternoon. I think I'm going to have something to do. I might want to work on this one of the evenings, but then again, I'm more often going to go for equal download satisfactory. We shall see. Have a good day.